What's going on, y'all? This is B. Taylor. Thank you for tuning in to the 4-part series of how I became debt-free during COVID-19. We are currently on part 4. Yes, the final part of the 4-part series. Now, just to recap for you, from the last portion, we were on 3.3, and that was regarding the multiple income streams, specifically the stock market. Now, if you remember where we left off, we were talking about the stock market where I was taking a big hit, right? We were talking about Norwegian and how I lost basically a third of the amount of money that I invested into that particular stock. Now, there was a reason why I stopped right at that point, because if you remember, we were talking about the multiple income streams in the previous parts, 3.1 and 3.2, right? 3.1 was regarding real estate. 3.2 was regarding the supplemental income, specifically Turo. And we talked about how I was able to generate a stream of income for each of those. Well, 3.3 was talking about the stock, but not really how I was able to use that as a stream of income. Really, all we talked about was a loss, and there was a reason for that. I stopped there because I wanted to show you the perseverance of it. And that gets specifically into this portion here, which is part 4, sticking to the plan. Now, in terms of the stock market losing that amount of money, it was actually more than a third. It was $25 per share for the Norwegian stock when I bought into it. Now, you remember I was saying I bought at the height before it started to plummet down. I ended up selling that stock at $15 a share. So I ended up losing about 10K, which is more closer to 40%. Now, the average person may look at that and say, wow, that is a huge amount of money to lose in maybe a week and a half's time. So, looking at that, who's going to pull out, who's going to give up and say, I'm going to cut my losses from here and move on. Well, that's not the approach that I wanted to take. My whole plan was sticking to the plan, and that plan was saying I wanted to become debt-free. I was using the stock market as a side hustle. I wasn't going to sit there, pull all of that money from the real estate investments that I generated income from, only to lose a portion of it and just cut my losses and say I'm fine. No, I had a plan, and I was going to stick to it. But I had to do research. I had to find some of these companies that may provide some supplemental gains so that I can offset that loss that I took from Norwegian. Rental car companies, I saw Hertz. They were filing for bankruptcy, but an amazing thing happened with them in the sense of even though the stock was plummeting, there was still an incredible trading volume, which allowed that stock to start increasing before it went down again and then start increasing. The cycles just become more condensed, but then it started going back down really quick. So I didn't want to try that too much. I tried other stocks in terms of Party City. I was looking at Alarm.com. But none of those things really took hold, right? I may have been getting some gains in one of those stocks where I was getting a small loss in the other. So they were almost offsetting each other. Nothing to really offset the huge chunk of money that I lost in Norwegian. So I had to slow down and regroup. I had to think, what can I do? What's really the benefactor of the COVID-19 pandemic? Once I started to sit back, I started to look at the news. Everything's right in front of you. Of course, the COVID-19 pandemic needs a vaccine. So I started looking into the stock markets, the stocks in terms of who's going to be the providers of the COVID-19 vaccines. So there were a few of them. You had Moderna, you had Pfizer, you had Vaxart, you had a whole slew of others. In addition to that, the administration for the U.S. government was talking about this Operation Warp Speed, where they were going to fund many of the COVID-19 vaccine companies vast amounts of money for research and to develop the COVID-19 vaccine so that they could deliver it by the end of the year. So there were a lot of companies that were trying to get on that pathway, but there was one in particular that really caught my attention. and that company goes by the name of Novavax. At the beginning of the year in January, it was between the $3 and $4 range per share for that particular stock. By the time I was feeling all down from Norwegian and all the other beach stocks, this was about mid-May, and I found Novavax. It was already at $45 a share. So it already went up by a factor of 10 at that point. Obviously, you're thinking, well, it already rode up. There's no way to go but down. But there was a lot more news that I thought would be able to come out of it. So I watched it for a few days at $45 a share. And after that few days was over with, it was at $50 a share. And I said, wow, I would have gained $5 per share if I would have went ahead and invested. So I said, you know what? I'm going to bite the bullet. I'm going to take a chance. I invested $25,000 at $50 a share. So I had 500 shares of Novavax at $50 a share. And then what happens? Yeah, it started to go back down. It went from $50 to $49 to down to $47. Once it hit the $46 and $45 range, I really had a decision to make here. I already got bit once by the Norwegian stock. Am I going to allow myself to get bitten again by the Novavax stock? Because it seems like they're following the same exact pattern. But then I started to think about it. I said it, pattern. It's a pattern that seems to be going up and going down. Am I going to sit there and let the pattern bite me again? Or am I going to wait it out? Or am I going to invest more stock? I told myself I'm not going to pull out this time. I'm going to wait it out and see what happens. I told myself I'll have it at a threshold of $40. If it hits below that, then I'll cut my losses and try to find another investment to do. Well, it started to go down to 45 to 44. It's hit 42 and it started to hover around that value, make some quick money. It stayed around 42 and then an amazing thing happened. There was some news that came out for Novavax that it was getting research money from CEPI to conduct the phase 1 trial, to further that phase 1 trial for the COVID-19 vaccine. So then the stock went up to 44, went up to 47, it went up to 51. So when it went up to 51, I knew I had all of my money back. Then I had a decision to make from there. Am I going to be able to stick it out, or should I just cut my losses and then find another way to get back the money I lost in the Norwegian stock? I told myself, well, I already waited it out. I might as well ride the train to see what happens with this cycle and see how high up the roller coaster goes. So I decided to wait it out, and then it went from 51 to 55 to 60 to 63. It started hovering around 63 before there was even more funding that started to come in for this stock. So it went up to 67 to 70 to 73. It was hovering around the $73, $74 range, I believe. And then something amazing happened. That Operation Warp Speed, it was funding a lot of companies, but not Novavax. It was one of those things that was lagging behind. They weren't funding it, but there were a lot of critics that were saying Novavax should be one of the front runners because they're showing the most promise with the type of vaccine that they're providing. So then Operation Warp Speed funded Novavax. What happened? It shot all the way up to $100, up to $110, all the way up to $114 before it started to plateau. Again, had another decision to make. Where am I at this point? It looks like I've already offset the loss from Norwegian. But what does that mean for me? That just means I'm back to square one at this point. Should I continue to let this roller coaster go up, or not wait for it, pull my money out and find another stock? I told myself I might as well wait it out and see how high this roller coaster goes. And then what happens? The results of the phase 1 trial come out. After those results come out, it starts to shoot way up. It goes from 120 to 130 to 140. At 150, they started talking about all of the positive results that they got from it. some people misinterpreted it and they thought it was a negative thing. It shot all the way down to 110, which scared me for a split second. But after 10 minutes of that, it started to rise back up. It shot all the way up to about $199 that night. After it was an aftermarket for the stock market, it shot all the way up to 170, 180. By the next morning, it was at $199. And it just stayed around the 170 to 190 range. And at that point, I knew that I had enough investment that I gained from that stock that I can pull out when I needed to. But I didn't want to be too greedy, but I told myself I'm going to let this roller coaster continue to go and wait for it to go down. So I set a threshold. I saw it starting to go down, and it was starting to go down very quickly. I pulled out at 150. But I knew that I got to the point that I needed in order to become debt free. So yes, at that point in time, I did pull out. I pulled out of all of the other stocks in the stock market. You think about Novavax. I bought it at $50 a share for $25,000. I sold it at $150 per share. I tripled my money from Novavax alone with that particular investment in the stock market. You can call it lucky. You can call it looking for the right diamond in the rough or needle in the haystack, whatever your metaphor is. But the real point of this is that I had to stick to the plan until I found something that worked and allowed me to execute and complete my plan. That's exactly how I got to the point of becoming debt free. If you remember this from the very first video, that was my payoff letter from my banking institution stating that I have paid off the last debt that I had in my name, which was the mortgage for the house that I'm in today. You guys know that, this last portion here is saying stick to the plan. You need to make sure you have a plan. And once you have it, don't sway away from it until you complete the mission that you have set out to complete. That's all I have for this 4-part series. Thank you guys so much for sticking with me to the end. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, if there's any inconsistencies with what I said, this is truly from the heart. I'm not going off of any script. Please let me know. I will do my best to clarify everything in the comments section below. Now, for the end of this video, since we're at the end of this series, I want you guys to continue sticking with me as I move forward in my journey to start building wealth now that I'm debt-free. I have this channel. It's called now The Bill of Wealth. It's obviously a pun on a clean bill of health. Now that I'm debt-free, I have a clean bill of wealth. So it's probably a little corny, but the point here is I can start fresh. I can start living my life debt-free associated with it. I'm not going to be tied to any necessity to get something at a ridiculous price or anything like that. So I want to share every experience that I encounter that's worthy of your eyes with you. And I'm going to do my best to post as often as possible, but at least once a week. So if you stick with me, please click like, subscribe, and I will see you in the near future. Thanks.